Stop whatever you are doing, because what you are about to hear is not speculation, not rumor, and not the kind of geopolitical analysis that gets walked back when the headlines change. Tonight, the most consequential weapons transfer in modern military history has been confirmed by multiple independent intelligence sources, and the implications are so catastrophic, so irreversible, and so devastating to the existing security architecture that every major government on Earth is currently in emergency session trying to calculate responses to something that has already happened. Iran has just received 300 RS-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia. 300, not 30. Not a symbolic transfer for political theater. 300 fully operational road-mobile thermonuclear delivery systems that in a single transaction have given Tehran a strategic nuclear arsenal larger than Britain, France, and China combined. The number is not a projection. It is not an estimate. It is confirmed inventory now sitting on Iranian soil, and the clock that started ticking the moment those final transports crossed into Iranian airspace is now down to 12 hours before Israel's response window closes permanently. 12 hours before military options that exist right now cease to exist. 12 hours before the regional power balance shifts so dramatically that the Middle East will never look the same again. And in Washington, the response is not mobilization. It is paralysis. Total, complete administrative paralysis, as the Biden administration has frozen all military support commitments to Israel pending emergency policy review, leaving America's primary regional partner operationally isolated at the exact moment when Iranian strategic capability has increased by a factor that makes the term game-changing seem inadequate. If this channel has been giving you the analysis that cuts through the noise of official narratives and mainstream defense commentary, now is the moment to make sure you never miss an update. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this video with everyone in your network who is serious about understanding what is actually happening at the sharp edge of global power competition. Because tonight's analysis takes you inside every dimension of this transfer. The technical specifications of the RS-24 Yars system and why it represents a capability threshold that Israel cannot counter. The operational timeline that gives Tel Aviv exactly 12 hours to act before the strategic window closes. The political calculus in Washington that has produced a complete freeze on military support at the worst possible moment. The Russian strategic calculation behind a transfer of this magnitude. And the regional and global implications of a Middle East where Iran possesses assured second strike nuclear capability that renders conventional deterrence obsolete. The RS-24 Yars is not a battlefield weapon. It is not a tactical system. It is not designed for regional contingencies or limited military objectives. The RS-24 Yars is a dedicated strategic thermonuclear delivery platform specifically engineered to penetrate advanced ballistic missile defense architectures and deliver multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles to targets thousands of kilometers away. The system was developed by Russia as a direct response to American ballistic missile defense deployments in Eastern Europe, incorporating every technical countermeasure that 3 decades of Russian strategic weapons development has produced. Each RS-24 carries between 4 and 6 independently maneuvering warheads with individual yields in the 100 to 300 kiloton range. Each warhead follows a separate ballistic trajectory after separation, forcing defensive systems to attempt simultaneous intercepts against multiple incoming threats from a single missile launch. The re-entry vehicles incorporate advanced maneuvering capability in the terminal phase, executing lateral displacement at hypersonic velocity to defeat intercept geometry calculations that ballistic missile defense systems rely upon. The missiles themselves are mounted on mobile transporter erector launcher chassis that provides strategic mobility, eliminating the fixed silo vulnerability that has traditionally allowed first strike targeting of nuclear arsenals. A TEL unit can relocate from its garrison to a launch position anywhere within a 1,000-kilometer radius, set up for launch, execute the fire sequence, and relocate again within a time frame that makes preemptive strike targeting essentially impossible. The Russian military has spent 20 years perfecting the operational doctrine for road mobile strategic systems, developing communications architecture, reconnaissance integration, and launch authorization procedures that ensure survivability even under sustained attack. Iran has now inherited not just the hardware, but the operational methodology that makes these systems strategically effective. The 300-unit transfer gives Iran an instant strategic capability that took the Soviet Union 40 years to build. 300 RS-24 Yars missiles carrying an average of 5 warheads each means Iran now possesses approximately 1,500 deliverable thermonuclear warheads. 1,500. The United Kingdom maintains a total strategic arsenal of 225 warheads. France maintains approximately 300. China is estimated to possess around 350 deployed strategic warheads. Iran has just received a nuclear delivery capability that exceeds the entire British and French arsenals combined, delivered in a single transaction that bypassed every non-proliferation framework, every diplomatic constraint, and every international monitoring mechanism that was supposed to prevent exactly this scenario. The technical sophistication of the RS-24 creates specific challenges for Israeli air defense that go beyond simple numerical overwhelming. The Arrow-3 exo-atmospheric interceptor system that Israel has deployed specifically to counter ballistic missile threats was designed and optimized against first-generation Iranian systems like the Shahab-3 and the Sejil-2. Those systems follow predictable ballistic trajectories with limited or no terminal phase maneuvering capability. Against those targets, Arrow-3 achieves intercept probabilities in the 80 to 90% range under ideal conditions. Against an RS-24 Yars re-entry vehicle executing terminal phase maneuvers at 20 times the speed of sound, Arrow-3's intercept probability degrades to somewhere in the 30 to 40% range at best. And that is against a single incoming warhead. Against a salvo attack where multiple warheads are arriving simultaneously from different trajectories, the intercept probability for any defensive system drops exponentially. David Sling, Israel's medium-range interceptor designed to handle threats in the altitude band below Arrow-3's engagement envelope, faces similar degradation against maneuvering re-entry vehicles. The system was optimized against cruise missiles, tactical ballistic missiles, and aircraft, not against strategic re-entry vehicles traveling at hypersonic velocity with active countermeasures. Iron Dome, the lowest tier of Israel's integrated air defense, is completely irrelevant against this threat category. The system cannot even track targets moving at the velocities involved, let alone attempt intercepts. The nightmare scenario that Israeli defense planners are modeling right now is a coordinated saturation attack, where Iran launches simultaneous salvos from multiple positions distributed across their territory. The mobile launcher dispersal means Israel cannot know in advance where the launch points will be. The multiple warheads per missile mean each successful launch creates 4 to 6 separate intercept problems. The maneuvering re-entry vehicles mean each intercept attempt has a higher failure probability than the defensive architecture was designed to handle. Run the mathematics on a 50-missile attack wave, which represents less than 20% of Iran's new inventory, and the defensive intercept requirements exceed Israel's total interceptor magazine depth. Every Arrow-3 missile in Israeli inventory could be fired in perfect intercept attempts, and the number of warheads getting through would still be catastrophic. The operational timeline is now the critical variable driving every calculation in Tel Aviv. The 300 RS-24 systems arrived in Iran on transporter aircraft and cargo ships over the past 72 hours. Intelligence reporting confirms final deliveries were completed 18 hours ago. The systems are currently concentrated at 3 primary facilities in central and western Iran, where Russian technical teams are conducting handover procedures, systems familiarization, and initial operational training for Iranian crews. This concentration represents a temporary vulnerability window that will close as soon as the missiles are dispersed to their operational deployment positions. Iranian military doctrine calls for immediate dispersal of strategic systems to avoid exactly the kind of preemptive strike scenario that Tel Aviv is currently evaluating. Intelligence estimates give Iran approximately 36 to 48 hours to complete the technical handover and begin systematic dispersal operations. Israeli defense planners assess they have approximately 12 hours remaining in which a preemptive strike option remains theoretically viable. 12 hours before the missiles begin moving out from the central facilities to disperse positions across Iranian territory where they become effectively untargetable. Once dispersed, the road-mobile nature of the systems means Iran can relocate launchers continuously, making sustained targeting impossible. The kill chain requirements for targeting a mobile strategic missile system are brutal. You need real-time reconnaissance to locate the launcher. You need a weapons platform in position to engage within the narrow window before the target relocates. You need precision munitions capable of destroying a hardened military vehicle. And you need to repeat this process hundreds of times against an adversary with sophisticated air defense coverage and massive geographic depth. The strike option that Israel possesses right now requires a coordinated attack across multiple target complexes using every deep strike asset in the Israeli Air Force inventory. F-35I, Adir stealth fighters, would penetrate Iranian air defense coverage to deliver precision strikes against the facility infrastructure. F-15I, Ram strike fighters, carrying extended-range cruise missiles, would hit secondary targets and suppression of air defense sites. The operation would require aerial refueling support, electronic warfare support, and complete commitment of Israel's deep strike-capable platforms for a mission duration that would leave Israeli airspace vulnerable during the execution window. Success is not guaranteed. Iranian air defense architecture includes S-300 and potentially S-400 systems that can engage stealth aircraft under certain conditions. But the operation is technically feasible right now, with acceptable risk levels. In 12 hours, that changes. Once the missiles disperse, Israel loses the preemptive option permanently. The strategic calculus shifts from preventing Iranian nuclear capability to managing a Middle East where Iran possesses assured second strike capability that cannot be neutralized. Every military option, every deterrence calculation, every regional security assumption changes when your primary adversary possesses 1,500 deliverable nuclear warheads on survivable mobile platforms. And Washington's response to this strategic inflection point is a complete freeze on military support pending policy review. If you want analysis this sharp, this deep, this willing to challenge official narratives, subscribe now to ensure you never miss an update. Because what is happening in Washington right now is not careful deliberation. It is institutional paralysis driven by an administration that has spent 3 years avoiding decisive Middle Eastern engagement and is now confronted with a crisis that demands immediate action. The Biden administration freeze affects every category of military support that Israel relies upon for sustained combat operations. Precision-guided munitions resupply is frozen. Aerial refueling support for extended-range strike missions is frozen. Intelligence sharing on Iranian nuclear facilities and strategic weapons deployments is frozen. Emergency ammunition transfers that have been routine for 40 years are frozen. The freeze is being justified internally as a necessary pause to reassess American interests in light of changing regional realities. But the operational effect is that Israel is being isolated at the exact moment when American support matters most. The political calculation driving the freeze is complex but comprehensible. The Biden administration has invested enormous political capital in preventing regional escalation and avoiding direct American military involvement in Middle Eastern conflicts. An Israeli preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear assets using American-provided weapons and American intelligence support would represent exactly the kind of escalation that administration policy has been designed to prevent. The White House assessment is that supporting an Israeli first strike against a Russian-armed adversary risks direct confrontation with Moscow at a time when American strategic attention is consumed by Ukraine and the Pacific deterrence posture. The calculation is that allowing Iran to achieve secure second strike capability is preferable to the risk associated with supporting an Israeli attempt to prevent it. This calculation represents a fundamental transformation in American Middle Eastern strategy. For 70 years, American policy has been built on preventing hostile regional powers from acquiring strategic weapons that could threaten American partners or American interests. The freeze on Israeli support signals that this policy framework is being abandoned in favor of a new approach based on accepting adversary capabilities and managing regional competition through diplomatic engagement rather than military dominance. The language coming from administration officials talks about new regional security architecture, inclusive security dialogues, and de-escalation frameworks. The reality is that Washington has decided Israeli security concerns are less important than avoiding confrontation with Russia and limiting American Middle Eastern commitments. The Russian calculation behind this transfer is equally clear. Moscow has just fundamentally altered Middle Eastern power dynamics in a way that advances multiple strategic objectives simultaneously. First, the transfer demonstrates to American partners worldwide that Washington cannot or will not protect them when serious challenges emerge. Every ally watching this sequence is recalculating the value of American security guarantees. Second, the transfer creates a permanent distraction for American strategic attention in the Middle East, pulling focus and resources away from Ukraine and the Pacific. Third, the transfer cements Russian-Iranian strategic partnership in ways that create long-term Russian influence over Iranian policy. Fourth, the transfer demonstrates Russian willingness to escalate strategic competition beyond traditional constraints, shifting international perception of acceptable great power behavior. Russia is not giving these systems to Iran out of ideological alignment or anti-Western solidarity. Russia is conducting strategic investment in chaos, creating conditions that consume American attention, divide American alliances, and demonstrate American inability to enforce preferred outcomes. The cost to Moscow is 300 missiles from production runs that Russian strategic forces have already replaced with newer systems. The benefit is a Middle East in permanent crisis that prevents American strategic focus on European or Pacific theaters. The regional implications are immediate and devastating. Saudi Arabia is conducting emergency consultations on nuclear weapons acquisition options, reaching out to Pakistan for potential security guarantees and exploring accelerated domestic enrichment programs. The UAE is reassessing its normalization agreements with Israel in light of Israeli inability to counter Iranian strategic capability. Egypt is calculating whether continued alignment with American interests makes sense when Washington demonstrates it will not act to counter existential threats to American partners. Turkey is positioning itself as the essential mediator between Iran and regional Sunni powers, expanding influence through diplomatic positioning that exploits the security vacuum created by American paralysis. The global order implications extend far beyond Middle Eastern regional dynamics. Every non-proliferation framework, every arms control regime, every diplomatic mechanism designed to prevent exactly this kind of strategic weapons transfer has just been demonstrated to be meaningless when great powers decide to ignore them. Russia has transferred 300 strategic nuclear delivery systems to a regional power under international sanctions specifically designed to prevent weapons acquisition, and the international response is statements of concern and emergency meetings that will produce no consequences. China is watching and learning that strategic weapons proliferation carries no meaningful costs when great powers are willing to accept the risks. North Korea is watching and calculating whether its own strategic systems might be valuable commodities in a world where weapons transfers face no effective constraints. The non-proliferation regime that has prevented nuclear weapons spread for 50 years has just suffered a potentially fatal blow. If Russia can transfer strategic delivery systems to Iran without meaningful consequences, what prevents China from transferring systems to Pakistan or North Korea from expanding its own transfer relationships? The entire architecture of nuclear restraint depends on great power acceptance of mutual limitations. Russia has just demonstrated it no longer accepts those limitations, and neither the United States nor any international institution is willing or able to enforce them. The scenario modeling that defense analysts are running right now produces outcomes that range from catastrophic to civilizational. The optimistic scenarios involve Iran using its new strategic capability purely for deterrence, maintaining the systems as a counter to potential Israeli or American military action without ever employing them. Even these optimistic scenarios involve permanent transformation of regional power dynamics, with Iran able to conduct regional military operations with effective immunity from external intervention, Iranian proxies operating with increased impunity throughout the region, and American partners increasingly distancing themselves from Washington due to demonstrated unwillingness to counter serious threats. The pessimistic scenarios involve Iranian strategic miscalculation, crisis escalation spirals, or deliberate employment of strategic weapons in regional conflicts. An Iranian leadership convinced it possesses assured second strike capability might take risks it would never have considered without that capability. A crisis in the Strait of Hormuz could escalate to nuclear threshold faster than diplomatic channels can respond. A conventional conflict between Israel and Iranian proxies could cross nuclear thresholds if either side believes it faces existential threat. The absolute worst scenarios involve cascading proliferation, where Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt all pursue crash nuclear weapons programs in response to Iranian capability, creating a Middle East with 6 or 7 nuclear-armed powers operating without established doctrines, clear command structures, or crisis communication channels. The risk of accidental nuclear war, miscalculation-driven escalation, or deliberate employment in conventional conflicts would increase by orders of magnitude. And the precedent would establish that any regional power willing to align with a great power sponsor can acquire strategic capabilities regardless of international frameworks designed to prevent proliferation. Subscribe to this channel because in a world this dangerous, analysis this sharp is not optional. It is necessary. What is your assessment of where this goes from here? Has this transfer permanently altered the Middle Eastern power balance, or will Washington find a way to reassert control? Share this analysis with everyone in your network who understands that official narratives rarely capture what is actually happening at the strategic level. Tonight, history did not merely turn a page. It slammed the entire book shut and set it on fire. Iran has received 300 RS-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia. Israel has 12 hours to act before the preemptive option closes forever. And the United States has frozen all military support to its primary regional partner at the exact moment when American backing matters most. The world will never be the same. There is no going back from this moment. The decisions made in the next 12 hours will echo across decades, shaping regional security competition, global proliferation dynamics, and the fundamental question of whether American security guarantees retain any meaning in an era of great power competition, unconstrained by traditional limitations. Stay sharp, stay ahead, and never stop asking the questions that matter.